protocol?
Good.
Go ahead and turn yours on.
Always forget, huh? Good evening. The York County Zoning Board of Appeals is called to order. First item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. And I just want to note that there was a revision to what we had in the final website minutes. So if you look on the last page of the minutes, page 7 of your package, there was a change in the vote, actual vote, 6-1 rather than 7-0, with Barbara Candler nay. Okay, so we don't need to make a change to that. Wouldn't be a change to the minutes. Did you have a chance to look at the remaining?
Yeah, there was one thing that bugged me about it too. I found later on in the package where staff and the folks met, about the tree ordinance thing on that same item, but it's not mentioned in the minutes. It was it's further in, it's deeper in here. Information, we as a board instructed the staff to meet with them and kind of see what they could work out. I think that should have been reflected in the minutes, that action, rather than a separate memo.
Well, it would just need to be that we recommended they meet, not the results of it or if they actually met.
But the action was we recommended they meet. I would have thought that would have been in the minutes. When I first looked for it, I didn't think they had met. And then as I went deeper in the packet, obviously they did.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying it's not in the minutes that we instructed them as a board to meet together. But if y'all are comfortable with it this way.
So you want to amend?
All I know is that the board instructed staff.
For item 5?
Yeah.
So my method is to say defer this to August 12th to allow the applicant and staff to meet.
Because then there's memos behind it where they did meet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I didn't know where the minutes were stored versus somebody looks in the future.
Good catch.
And then first page, modification spelling, just a minor, at the very top, modification to agenda. All right, any other potential corrections?
Well, regarding the agenda.
Well, that would be next. We'll hold off on that one.
Oh, you're still doing the minutes. Okay, that's right.
Just the minutes. So have a motion to approve with the amendments.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor of making the changes? Okay, very good, thank you. You got that, Asia?
Okay,
right.
then I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules and amend the agenda, taking old business, item number 1, and put it right before item number 3 in new business to keep those two grand tree variances together.
We got a motion to suspend the rules and move item 1 of the old business to between 2 and 3 of the new business. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. All right, so that brings us up to the new business, case Z2132. And as we present these cases, go back that one slide, please. Just want to remind everybody that mute your phones or turn them off. And as we present each case, staff will make a presentation, the applicant will make a presentation. We'll open it up for a public hearing. And any additional comments by the applicant if needed, then close the public hearing. Have a motion from the board to accept, deny, or defer. And then the discussion of the board and a vote. All right, so each case will follow that procedure. As you come to the podium to speak, please state your name and your address for the record. And when you speak, please speak right into the microphone since it doesn't really pick it up if you're speaking behind, turn around and speak to people. All right, and then if somebody is speaking, please, the remaining people in the audience, do not have any conversations. If you need to speak, you please exit the room. I'd appreciate that. All right. First case, Z2132. No.
There we go. All right, Marion Ray, zoning planner for York County. First case tonight for new business is Z21-32. The applicants are Gary and Shirley Ferris, and the property location is 1550 Ernest Road here in the York community. It's zoned RUD and they're requesting a road frontage variance of 100 feet. Here you see the zoning map of the parcel. You can tell the surrounding area is zoned RUD. Directly to the west is City of York, so it's not too far from us here. They're between Old York Road and York Highway. And you can tell from the aerial, the area is predominantly rural. And the plat here, the blue outline is the original plat. The red outline is the proposed plat. The lighter green there is Ernest Road. That's the end of the county maintenance there. The darker green line is an easement heading over to the property to the west, and they are proposing dividing off of this easement. It's a 2-acre lot out of approximately 10 acres, and it is to be for a home to be built on the lot. So going through the criteria, for A, the subject parcel is conforming the 10 acres. It has a legal road frontage on Ernest Road. So staff finds that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. And then for B, based on the previous finding, there are no extraordinary or exceptional conditions pertaining to the property. Staff finds it also does not meet this criteria. For C, the subject parcel is buildable in its current configuration and could support 2 homes, up to 2 homes, as a primary dwelling and an accessory dwelling unit. So staff finds the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. And the authorization of a variance will not be in substantial detriment to any adjacent properties, as the proposed road frontage, while non-conforming, will not restrict the usage of existing neighboring single-family lots. Further, there will be no change to the 2 existing driveways, which provide access to the parcel and that parcel in the rear, along with other parcels along the non-county maintained Ernest Road. That easement they are proposing to divide off of is a non-exclusive easement. It travels with the property if it is ever sold to the rear, and it would encompass a second home if the variance was approved. So as such, there will be no harm to the character of the district by the granting of the requested variance. So staff finds that it does meet this criteria. Unfortunately, it does not meet all 4 criteria, so staff has to recommend denial of the variance. And I'll go back to this point. Do you have any questions for staff?
So the county maintained portion of Ernest Road ends right where that green block ends, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's a private maintained?
Private maintained after. It's still named Ernest Road, but it's an easement instead of.
Is it, so actually, who actually owns that property then with the existing right-of-way?
Oh, the applicants own.
Because your previous map with the zoning, if you go back, well, just that one, it appears that the road property, and maybe it's just the width of that white line, and not
yes,
really the property lines there.
Right, the county maintenance ends on the plat I marked up, but it does, the road itself does extend for 911 purposes and addressing down like a shared driveway easement.
And that is gravel.
Ernest Road, to that point, I cannot remember, I believe it is partially paved. After that, it is not paved.
So if you go back, go forward right there, it's hard to see there, but at the end of that green block, there's a portion of a property line that's 33 feet long, right? So,
Yes.
but that's not counted in the 161.94
No, the,
feet. When you're talking about road frontage, that 33 feet is not, you wouldn't count that in there?
that's the old measurement of the width of the right-of-way. So the end of the right-of-way there would be 66 feet for county maintenance road. So technically, it's not frontage, but the road itself, and even if we added it together, it wouldn't have enough frontage.
Okay, still less than 200.
If there was
That's
a
an-
cul-de-sac there, would it be considered frontage then, or?
With the cul-de-sac, they could make a smaller road frontage, but only
There's
if it
no
was curb and
cul-de-sac.
gutter.
Gotcha.
All right, any further questions? Thank you. Would the applicant please come forward? Name and address, please.
Gary Ferris and Shirley Ferris, and we live in Clover, 2375 Clover.
Patterson Road in Clover.
Shirley, this is Shirley's property she grew up on, and we want some variance for road frontage in order to build a house in the red 2 acres there.
Yeah, we own all that's encompassed in the blue area. My parents owned 50-something acres at one time. They're now deceased, and as after they deceased, the property was split up amongst the children, and that's why we already had some. My brother is the one who has the little green line going to his property. Daddy gave him the easement going there years ago when he was still alive. So we've decided we would like to live out on the family farm. So that's why we're requesting the variance. We own the 12 and a half acres there. So the only thing we want to do is just build a house.
So currently, there's no house on that
Currently,
parcel?
there's no house there. No, the old home place was torn down.
And as I read through the application, your purpose was to make a smaller parcel for lending purposes?
Yeah, we just didn't want to put up the full 12 and a half acres. We just didn't want to put that up for collateral. We could pay for the house. We just don't want to take that much money out of the bank at one time and pay for the thing. So we were just wanting to only put up 2 acres as collateral for the loan. That's the whole purpose of it. Once this is paid for, which probably won't take but a few years, we're not going to do a 30-year loan, then we will encompass it all back into one parcel of land.
But you still could build without this variance?
Well, we just would rather not have to take that much money out of 401k at one time, We'd rather not do that.
But that's only if you paid cash for it.
That's right, we don't want to have to do that.
But you're going to get a mortgage.
Construction loan to begin with, and then we go into a mortgage after that.
So getting back to Tony's question, the road, once it, the private portion of the easement, is that gravel?
The private portion, you talking about the green
Ernest,
line?
of Ernest Road or Ernest
No,
Road?
Ernest Road is paved to the end of that green.
Right, and then when it comes through your property, is that gravel?
Yeah, it's kind of dirt
Uh-huh.
up to one point, and then it's just
Like asphalt?
secondary
Okay,
asphalt over to my brother's.
okay. And then the portion that goes through your property, I'm assuming you maintain?
We do.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And your brother is where the green line,
Yeah.
okay, Is there another residence at the end of the blue line, the top left corner?
Top
That
left
feeds
corner.
off of this?
Yeah,
Or this
where
private?
you see the little dotted lines going down?
Yes, ma'am.
That goes to, my brother Donald's house, and then, right where the blue line is at the corner, it'll split and go down to, two other brothers' homes. One of those brothers is deceased, but his wife is still living there, and then my oldest brother has property at the very end. And then there's also one other house there that used to be, a nephew's, but he's passed away, and so that house was sold to someone else. My sister owns property to the right of the blue line.
I'm still questioning about the loan and the collateral and not, what's the impact of having the entire property as collateral?
Well, God forbid, but anything ever happened, we wouldn't want to lose the old home place, We just want to make sure that never came into play, so.
Okay.
I mean, we could do it if push comes to shove, or we could, resurvey it so that we could end up with more property if necessary. It's just that we just rather not do that if we could get around it.
And what was your reasoning to take this 2 acres in the middle of the property versus,
That was the area that we wanted to build a house.
okay,
In the 2 acres there. And, the lady with the bank said we could have the 2 acres for the construction loan.
okay.
And we just needed the variance for the road frontage
Mm-hmm.
to that point.
Why did y'all cut the front? I'm assuming you own the barn
We
now,
do.
right?
We
Yes,
do.
Why didn't you just pitch it out a little bit?
Well, we just decided this is where we wanted to build the house. It just has a pretty view there and everything.
I'm talking about the frontage. Why didn't you just bring the frontage another 50 feet?
I thought the frontage that was required had to touch Ernest Road and not my brother's easement.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, is that correct, that it had to be frontage on Ernest Road and not my brother's easement?
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Megan? Tony? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody here to, we'll open it up for the public hearing. Anybody here to speak in favor of the variance request? Anybody here to speak against the variance request? Okay. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do we have a motion from the board? Well, for discussion purposes, I make a motion to deny the request.
I'll second.
All right? And we have a motion to deny and a second. And I think that from what we were hearing, they could develop this, they could build their house without getting the variance. And trying to cut it out and then put it back together in the futures, maybe it'll happen and maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make the 4 criteria work, and I maybe could get on board with B and say that these conditions do not apply to any other property in the vicinity, just because of the weird road frontage and stuff like that. But I can't, it works the way it is, so I just can't find any reason to change it.
Yeah, I'm struggling with it too, to allow it, since it can be done without a variance.
Yeah, because it does say it's for mortgage purposes only, and
Right.
financial's not a consideration.
Right.
All right. Any other discussion? No? All right, we have a motion to deny the variance request. All in favor of the denial, the motion, raise your hand. Thank you. All right, our next case, Z 21-33.
All right, good evening, board. My name is Rachel Grothy, zoning administrator with the county. So this is for a variance request at 5554 Riverfront Road in the Clover community. The property is zoned PD or planned development. And so this variance request is twofold. So the applicant is requesting two variances in order to construct a single-family home within the rear yard setback and a portion of a deck and pool within the Lake Wiley buffer. So the property is zoned PD and it is located within the Lake Wiley overlay. The PD requires a 50-foot rear yard setback. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing house and construct a new house entirely within the 50-foot rear yard setback. Further, the applicant is requesting to encroach within the 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer. Specifically, a corner of the proposed pool and pool deck will encroach into the buffer by approximately 9 feet, and a portion of the proposed deck will encroach into the buffer by approximately 12.5 feet. And so here's a vicinity map. So the project site is a flat lot, and it's approximately 11,600 square feet in area. The site is lot 43 in Riverfront Estates, which consists of 48 waterfront lots, and it contains a mix of older and newer single-family homes. So we have some photos of the site. So the lot currently contains one single-family home that, based on assessor records, appears to have been present since at least 1972. The 964 square foot house can be described as a lake cabin in poor condition and is located approximately mid-lot outside of the required 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer. The site is wooded and contains several trees, including 2 grand trees toward the front of the property. So here's just a couple of photos showing the front of the house.
And when you say front, you're talking roadside, correct? Not lakeside?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then here is a view of the back of the house, and then the bottom photo shows the view towards the lake from the house, just to give you all a little bit of an idea of what's going on out there.
And the stake is, back up a minute, the stake on the left, is that the front corner?
I'm sorry?
See the stake? Oh,
Yes.
wait a minute.
There's one left and right.
Right, there's 2 of them.
Those the buffer markers?
Is that the buffer line?
I'm not sure. We'd have to ask the applicant that.
And there looks like there's one over by the fence line too on the right of the picture.
I know that, and we'll get to this a little bit later, that the property line is actually up. The rear property line is actually up closer than you might think, and there's a swath of land that is owned by Duke. So the rear property line doesn't end at the lake, but I'll show you that in just a minute.
The, looks like the property line is 18.3 feet off of the edge of the house.
Okay.
So the Riverfront Estates PD was established in 2002, and the purpose of the Planned Development District is to allow for flexibility in the development of land. So as such, Riverfront has its own development guidelines, including setbacks. So the setbacks are as follows. So for the front, it's 5 feet. For the sides, it's 3 feet. For the rear, it is 50 feet from the 570 contour line. And there's the plat, and I pulled that section language from the PD. So the rear property line is set back approximately 50 feet from the edge of the lake. So as such, the property line does not follow the bank of the lake. The land between the rear property line and the top edge of the riprap is owned by Duke. The existing house is considered legal nonconforming as it is located entirely within the required rear yard setback. The PD identifies and differentiates between the 570 contour line and the 569.4 contour line. The PD stipulates that if any of the setbacks cannot be adhered to, a variance may be requested by this board. So I've labeled things sort of in different colors here. So the red line there is actually the rear property line. And that darker blue line is the 570 contour line, and then the lighter blue line out towards the lake is the 569.4 contour line.
So just to clarify, the property between, or the land between the red line and the dotted light blue line is owned by Duke?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the applicant is proposing to construct a 2,400 square foot house with an 800 square foot attached garage, a 600 square foot attached rear deck, and a 375 square foot pool and accompanying pool deck. Portions of the deck, pool, and pool deck will encroach into the required 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer, and I've outlined that there in those purple triangles. The location of the proposed house covers the footprint of the existing house while extending farther out towards the lake. The applicant has indicated that this site plan is their preferred option as it preserves the 2 grand trees which are located at the front of the property. So then they submitted this as well, an alternative site plan. So this is a second and less preferred option that the applicant has proposed. So in this iteration, the deck and pool will be entirely outside the required 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer. So this is achieved by pushing the entire development forward. This version will require the removal of 2 grand trees. However, the majority of the development will still be within the rear yard setback. So I just want to sort of call to your attention that green line there is the setback line that the PD calls for, which is 50 feet from the 570 line, which is the darker blue one. And so basically that swath of land there in the front where the 2 grand trees are is what would be considered the developable area for this property if we were to follow the PD to the actual letter. So in order to grant a variance, the board must make 4 specific findings. So we'll go ahead and walk through these. And then for clarity's sake, I've decided to go through the findings separately for each of the 2 variances. So I'll start here with the rear yard setback. So the first being that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions that pertain to the lot. So the lot is encumbered, as we've talked about and as y'all have seen, is encumbered by a 50-foot rear yard setback from the 570 contour line. Because the lot is very flat, the distance between the 570 line and the 569.4 line is approximately 80 feet. This leaves only approximately 3,000 square feet of buildable area at the very front of the parcel. Therefore, staff finds the proposed variance does meet this criteria. And then moving on to B, in looking at all the lots in the Riverfront Estates PD, it appears that the majority of them have the same constraints, so a 50-foot setback from the 570 line. Therefore, the majority of the houses on the lots do not meet the required setback, and any new construction or additions would likely encroach into the required rear yard setback. The remedy for this generally applicable condition is an amendment to the PD and not a variance. So therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. And then moving on to C and D. So without a variance to the required 50-foot rear yard setback, the developable area is limited to about 3,000 square feet, and that's at the very front of the parcel. This area contains 2 33-inch grand trees. So therefore, staff finds the proposed variance does meet this criteria. And then the last one, so the encroachment into the setback with a single-family home will not be detrimental to any of the surrounding properties. It appears that all the nearby lots are developed within the same, if not closer, area as the proposed house. So therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance does meet this criteria. And so now we'll move into the second variance, which is encroaching into the Lake Wiley buffer. So the subject parcel is irregularly shaped in a manner that reduces its area given the concave lot line, which is on the lake side. However, even with the application of the 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer, there is sufficient buildable area on the lot to construct a single-family home. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. And then moving on to B, staff finds that there are no extraordinary or exceptional conditions that pertain to this lot as it relates to the lake buffer. As we've sort of talked about, the majority of the lots in the riverfront estates and really all along Lake Wiley in general are unevenly shaped due to the meandering shoreline and face similar constraints. So therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance to encroach into the Lake Wiley buffer does not meet this criteria. And then moving on to C. While the lot configuration coupled with the Lake Wiley buffer does restrict the buildable area, the fact remains that a home, garage, deck, and pool could all be constructed on the site within the confines of the code. The encroachment of the corner of the proposed pool and wooden deck into the buffer is not required in order for the owners to reasonably utilize their property. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. And then moving on to the last one, the proposed encroachment of the rear deck, pool, and pool deck will be detrimental to the public as the encroachment is counter to the intent of the Lake Wiley buffer, which was established to promote the public good. Therefore, staff finds that the proposed variance does not meet this criteria. So since we were unable to make all the required findings for both of the variances, we are recommending denial. However, staff is of the opinion that the 50-foot rear yard setback from the 570 contour line established by the PD does unreasonably restrict the property, and likely the majority of the properties within the riverfront estates. Therefore, the most appropriate and practical solution would be to amend the PD, which may require approval by county council. So in the event that y'all find differently and want to approve one or both of the variances, we've come up with some conditions. So the first two there have to do with if y'all feel that the variance findings are met for the 50-foot rear yard setback, then we recommend that all development shall occur outside of the 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer. And two, that the trees are protected and a licensed arborist assists in their preservation. And then and another scenario, if y'all want to approve the variance findings for encroaching into the Lake Wiley buffer, staff has the same recommended condition of approval for the licensed arborist and protecting those trees. So this concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions that y'all may have. I believe the applicant is here as well too.
Can you go back to the variance plan, the one that has with saving the trees? I just wanted to. Okay. Now. Okay. All right. I just had to check something.
Can you go back to the photo? Front yard looking out the lake.
Go back another one. That one?
No, the one.
That one shows the two grand trees right there in the front, so you can see those. But the bottom one is looking out at the lake from the back of the house.
But those are not the 2 grands, it's the other 2 grands you're talking about.
No, those aren't the trees that I mentioned in the report.
It's about dead anyway.
I'm sorry?
The one on the right looks like it's about dead anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I think those are off of actually, their property, if I look at the, plat.
So who makes the recommendation to county council to amend the PD to have 569.4 versus 570?
Wait, who makes that recommendation?
Yes.
I mean, I guess maybe the applicant would apply to amend that? To change that? I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, and then one other question. If we were to deny their preferred plan, and obviously they would have to come back then for the grand trees, correct? That would be a separate variance? I'm just saying, if we deny it, can we put in it as a condition? I'm just, what if?
I would think that it would need to come back for the removal of the grand trees. We would have an arborist. We would ask for an
Right.
arborist report first to see
Okay.
if they could be removed administratively.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank y'all.
Would the applicant please come forward?
Good evening. My name is Matthew Velkovich, 1565 Ebenezer Road. I'm an engineer that's representing the applicant here tonight. I'd like to thank Rachel for her hard work with this. We had a lot of discussions about this, and the only point we really disagree on is don't feel like it's the applicant's responsibility to amend a PD plan for a development that they neither own or currently live in right now. I feel like a variance is what it should be applied for an individual lot, as in this case. If there's an action that needs to be taken by council and they would like to have their permission, or we would certainly be happy to work with that. But I don't feel like amending a PD for an individual, for an entire neighborhood, where they would have to canvass 40-something other signatures, it should be their responsibility. I feel like that's far outside the normal realm.
I agree.
So, and again, we just proposed two plans, and it was a choice of, do we encroach into the buffer, or do we take out 2 grand trees? It was decided we would like to preserve the trees at all possible. Hence, that's why the plan you see before you with the encroachment into the buffer and the setback is shown us.
So that garage is what, 20 feet by
Yeah.
32?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It may be
38?
40. I think
Yeah.
it's,
A large garage.
So, a 3+ car garage. Would you compare it to?
yeah.
Okay.
Was there consideration of having a smaller garage and moving everything to be possibly out of, or not needing a variance for the Lake Wiley buffer?
Well, that would just affect the pool itself, but we would still have the deck. We really need to have the garage centered about midpoint of the house where it starts, because of how the roof lines work. So that's where the garage is located. It needs to start about midpoint. If we were to shift it over to the left a little, there'd be some problems getting that.
What if you reduce the size of it and you didn't have to shift it? You just shift the pool.
Shift the
And the
pool.
Well, if you cut the garage down, then you can bring the pool back towards the road. And you wouldn't need variance.
Well, you would have to minimize the size of the deck too.
don't know if you still need a variance or not, but just sitting here, I mean, is that an option? Do they have to have that large of garage
Or pool.
or pool?
What is the size of the pool? Do you know the dimensions offhand?
I wanna say it's, 23 by 15.
Okay.
And we can scale back the pool if we need to. That's certainly not a problem.
On this one here, I believe it, maybe that's 12.8 feet off the line there, never mind.
Any further questions?
I mean, even if you move the pool, we still got a deck issue, I mean.
Well, they can have portion of the deck. Because where the problem is where it wraps around. Isn't it where it wraps around?
If I may interject, there is a portion of the code that allows for, if the house is conforming, then you can encroach, I believe, a deck, if I'm remembering correctly, but you can encroach by 10 feet into the buffer. So there is potential for that. What's shown here is 12 and a half.
So you're talking 2.5 feet difference? Okay,
We would be willing to amend that back to 10 foot
okay,
On the deck.
on the deck.
okay.
Still leaves the problem with the pool though, right?
Right.
Well, make the pool smaller.
We'd be willing to,
Kidney shape it. Where's I'm missing on this drawing, where's the upper distance from the house footprint to the line over there? I see it's 7.5 down here.
For the 9.2. See, it's in the middle of the pool. 9.2, 2 arrows.
I'm talking about from the house to the line.
The house to line, 15.1. Goes to the property line.
Yeah,
But that's
well,
outside of the buffer.
but it's using the remaining, the same footprint of the existing house, so I think that makes a difference when you are within the buffer, doesn't it? If you're using the same footprint, there's exceptions.
in this case, we're not using the same footprint.
Oh, I thought we were.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're not.
That footprint is considerably smaller.
Okay. Okay.
It covers the area of where the
Gotcha.
existing house is, but it's larger and extends out farther towards
Okay.
the lake.
Okay.
Are you familiar, the pictures, are there, looking at the lake, are you familiar with what those two markers are?
Those,
The flags, the stakes?
we actually had the property lines and the buffer line staked as part of the survey to prepare.
Can we go back to that photo, please? There you go. Do you know which one is which? There's one at the bottom left and then one at the bottom right. One looks to be, and this is just,
I believe,
one's orange, one's pink.
I believe both of those are the property lines.
Okay.
All right, any further questions for the applicant? Thank you. Is anyone here to speak in favor of the variance request? Anyone here to speak against the request? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do we have a motion from the board?
So are we gonna do these, start with the rear setback first and then Lake Wiley buffer? Is that how you wanna do it? Because it's gonna be two motions.
Will be. Which one would you prefer? Is it next
Well-
one?
To the rear setback.
Yeah,
The rear- 50
yeah, I'll
rear,
make a
yeah.
motion to approve the rear setback, variance with the conditions as stated by staff. Do you want me to read through them or just, I gotta find the page.
94.
94. Okay, where's 94?
And that's to the PD, right? Or is that to the, that's the Lake Wiley buffer.
Hold on. Oh, here we are. Okay. So, okay, so there's two. Okay, wait. So all development must occur outside of the 50-foot. Wait, okay, conditions for the roof. Okay, yeah. So all development must occur outside of the 50-foot Lake Wiley buffer. The applicant shall obtain a licensed arborist to assist with the preservation of the existing grand trees on the property during the construction process with the adequate tree protection plan. Yeah, I think the other condition was for the Lake Wiley buffer. So those were just the two, correct? Okay.
Second.
Well, hold on. Are you looking at the page?
94. There's just two for the Lake Wiley, or the rear setback. The other one is
Okay.
for the buffer, and we haven't,
Lake Wiley buffer.
yeah, so there's just two for the current motion.
Okay.
Oh,
You second?
Second.
Good. Motion to, is that approve?
Well, you want discussion, or?
Yeah. Your motion was to approve, though, right?
Yes, approve, I'm sorry. Yes, it was to approve.
Approve the variance of the 50-foot rear setback
Right. I
with the
just,
two conditions.
yeah, I just think, it's a tricky lot. I mean, it's a hardship to build, obviously this is a tear down. They want a bigger house, and I think with the lay of the land and with the big area that's owned by Duke, which, isn't typical, I just think it would be hard to squeeze a house. You can't squeeze a house without a setback, and I hope they save the grand trees, and hopefully they're savable, but I just think it's a hardship that, that's gonna be hard to overcome without a variance, and this whole going through the, PD, I just think, like you said, for them to have to start that process sets them back in time, and it just seems like it's a bureaucratic nightmare to start, I just think it's easier just to grant them the variance for the setback.
I agree with Barb. I think that's why or one of the main reasons this board's here, to do things like this instead of trying to amend the PD. So I agree that they have hardship with that property line. So that's why I chose the second.
Reagan?
I'm
Any
good with
comments?
that. I'm good with that. That's reasonable.
All right, we have a motion to approve the variance with the two conditions. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Motion regarding Lake Wiley buffer.
And then I will make a motion to deny the variance for the Lake Wiley buffer.
I'll second. Okay.
Do we have oh, yes, okay. I just think, a pool and a deck is not a necessity. I think, as the applicant had stated, they can modify the size of the deck, they can modify the size of the pool to hopefully, not need a variance. So I just think there's a way to work around it to make it conforming and not, go into the buffer.
I think you're right, because I still don't understand why people move to the river to build a pool.
Might be water quality, I don't know, but.
That and the garage, I think if they needed to, they could modify that as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Combination of those three. Right. Further discussion? All right, I have a motion to deny the variance request for the Lake Wiley buffer. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. All right,
I'd like to request a 5-minute break before we start the next case.
I second.
Oh, okay.
all right. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, 5-minute break.
All right.
Now resume our meeting. Our next case, Z21-30. Waiting for staff. And we may have another break so that the applicant can present their PowerPoint slides.
Wait till everyone's back.
You can move the slides to this case. All right. Nope, too far.
Good evening, board. I'm Peter Kosicki. I'm York County's landscape architect. I will be presenting case number Z2130. This is a memo response to the last case on Kettle Song and their roadway plat. As stated from the previous ZBA meeting, this is a variance request to remove a number of grand trees on the Kettle Song site. The property is zoned residential on RC and RUD. The property has a special exemption to build a school on the site, specifically on the RUD site. As you know, this property is located in the southeastern part of the county, near the Chester County line, off of Pontuck and SE Highway 901. Just to refresh your memory, this is the overall site plan with the roadway plat. You can see that the road, they have a new Indigo Street going into teeing into 901. There's a traffic circle, and then it kind of meanders through the site, going around a wetland, and they have a number of proposed stormwater detention ponds within the site. So here we're getting into the meat of the presentation. So the reason that we're really bringing this case back to the board is because of the grand trees that were essentially in dispute, and then the roadway access that had seemed to not come to a conclusion as to how to move forward. So if you can remember from the last July ZBA, there was 39 grand trees that staff had accounted for. This included the trees that staff would administratively approve, and also there were 8 trees that staff found in the field that were not identified on the applicant's survey that needed to be accounted for. So I think it was addressed in the last ZBA meeting that essentially staff and the applicant just needed to get together and hash things out over a bottle of scotch. That didn't happen, but we did hash it out at a picnic table near the site, and we met with the arborist, their architect on staff, and their contractors. We walked the site and looked at all the trees that were in discussion, and we came to a conclusion and shook hands on site and agreed on a number. So you can see that this count reflects that. So as I stated earlier, there were 8 trees that they did not account for. Well, they surveyed those trees before we walked the site on July 23rd. 7 of those trees happened to be just outside the limits of disturbance, so we subtracted 7 of those from the count. We then would administratively approve 6 of those from the previous CBA, and then the applicant showed that 4 of those trees would be removed because they were even further from the limits of disturbance than we, staff, had previously thought. So that's how we get at 22 grand trees, and that's the agreed number for this roadway plat. Are you sure? I'm 100% sure.
And y'all are in
No
agreement,
questions.
right? Y'all are in agreement?
Or the applicant want to further debate this at this point. So this is the updated survey. So you should see the trees in red are the trees that are healthy, that they want to remove and are agreed upon. There's a couple trees in purple. Those are the 6 trees that would be administratively approved by staff because of adverse health or structural conditions. Most of them are pines, as the applicant would state. There are a couple of sweet gums, poplars on the site as well. So this is a blow up of the survey. So there was some, I think you brought up the question that the plans were difficult to read, and on the screen they definitely are. So we had the applicant blow them up so that it's easier for everyone to see the plans and to read what species they are and exactly where they're at, and look at their context and topo. So this is where the largest swath of grand trees are, and they're right along the lowland area of the perennial stream and wetland. And all of these are shown in the limits of disturbance, and you see the limits of disturbance in red there. This is probably looks familiar, this is a grand tree health assessment. So these are the 6 trees that we would administratively remove. We primarily look at health and structural conditions. I and then another staff member who has over 20 years of experience working with the Clemson Extension and identifying diseases in trees, work together to reach this consensus. And then we worked with the applicant as well to just compare notes. This next chart is really addressing Reagan's comments on the previous discussion of pine trees on the site. I know there's some concern about the pine trees and their longevity in terms of lifespan. So we actually had to go and research that. It's important to research that because that longevity associates value with those grand trees. There's a big difference if a tree lives 40 years versus say there's some trees in the Mediterranean that live for thousands of years. So it's not as steep of a concern to mitigate a grand tree that lives 40 years versus a tree that lives hundreds of years, for instance. So we found the study from the University of Virginia. This is the most credible source that we could find. As you know, there's a lot of riffraff on the internet these days. So in ideal conditions, in a forested environment, these trees can live a long time. You can see the shortest lived tree on this is a loblolly pine, and they live anywhere from 100 to 300 years. Now, this does not interject the aspects of urban context or disease. This is purely ideal conditions. I know Reagan had expressed in the last discussion that there are disease concerns in pine beetles with pines specifically, but I just wanted to at least bring this up to you as a board to mention that these trees do live a long time.
I don't have a problem with these numbers, that's true.
Yeah,
Except you got pine beetles.
exactly.
And this ain't Virginia, a lot hotter here. Trust me, I've sold a lot of pines, I know.
So we also need to go back into the site and look at the aerial history of the site to look at, was this site forested? Was this site bare? Was it harvested for pines? Was it harvested for cotton? So we look at this 1970 aerial, and you can see that a portion of the site is shown as fields, and a portion of the site is shown as natural forest here. So the roadway where New Indigo tees into 901, that's an open field. But as you transition into the wetland area where that perennial stream is, that is a natural forest at that point. You can see as time goes on that the forest kind of fills in, except for the northern portion of the site. And then in 1990, except for the very northern portion of the site, it's pretty much forested. And you can see there's the very southeastern section of the site, how I use this laser pointer, there we go. This area is now filled in with planted pines. So I know Craig Craze had brought up the idea that this was planted for pines. Well, yes, that's partially true. Yes, there is some of this area that was harvested for pines, but the rest of the area, we would agree as staff that this is a naturally forested area, especially where those grand trees are found. And the road is not being constructed in this area where there's harvested pine. So now we get to the SVT driveway access aspect of the variance. So as you know, we've worked with the applicant to ask for additional alternatives to relocate the site to avoid large swaths of grand trees. Most of those grand trees are found right in this riparian zone, this wetlands. As you can see, they're avoiding that for the most part there. And then we get into their mitigation plan. So in the last presentation, they had shown a mitigation plan, but about a third of those trees were shown off-site. There was some understandable confusion. They did not know that they could locate the trees on the actual site. They thought they had to just show them within the right-of-way limits for the road, which is understandable. So we worked with them and said, hey, you can put them on the school site because it's associated with the school. So they partially did that. We still need to work with the applicant to make sure these trees are going to be located in the appropriate locations. Currently, they're shown in a forest this is a forested canopy in here. So, but the idea here is they are showing the correct numbers. They are showing they're mitigating every inch of tree to be removed on site, which is a very generous mitigation plan.
So-
as it stated from the previous presentation, City of Rock Hill requires about half this mitigation. It's like 0.56.
So you're still reviewing this to approve it, or does it already meet the requirements?
It meets our requirements for mitigation.
What about those trees along Mount Holly Road?
Along the highway road,
Right, at the
Entrance?
new Indigo Street?
right here,
Yes. Is
Well-
that gonna be in the way of visibility?
well, they would have to show a side axis triangles to make sure that they're out of those, and those aren't shown on here. And again, this is more of a conceptual plan. I've spoken with the applicant specifically about this, and they're under the impression that these trees can be relocated at different locations on the site, field located, once the site construction plans are approved. Their intention of showing this was simply to just meet the numbers
Okay.
and show it as a conceptual plan.
Okay.
And we both agree that they need to move around a little bit. It's also worth mentioning that they're mitigating with native trees. All these trees natively grow within the southeastern Piedmont region. So they were replacing trees that essentially could grow on this land, is what we want for, and really the intention of our mitigation request from them. So now we get into the variance approval criteria. So the first criteria, it asks, is this property exceptional, and is there something that is specifically restricting them from developing? Utility lines, property size, is it too small to build a roadway? Are there topo issues where they can't build a road? So we got together as staff and we discussed this, and our answer is essentially no. There are not exceptional conditions restricting them from relocating the roadway to other locations of the site. We can get into this later if you have other questions. I think you're well aware of the issue. So B, it goes into, is this property, is it like the other properties in the area? And the answer is yes. It's pretty typical. It's a vacant site. It's mostly wooded at this point. It has pretty typical slope conditions throughout the site. So staff says this does not meet this criteria. C asks, by applying this variant, applying the code, does it unreasonably restrict the utilization of their property to build a roadway? Staff says essentially because of the sheer size of the site and compared to the size of the road, I think you're looking at 4 acres on a 107 acre site. There is flexibility to move that road to different locations. It's also worth mentioning that the roadway is serving the entire Kettle Song development, which has not been approved at this point. Staff looks at the roadway as an individual project at this point. So there is room to either reroute the road, redesign the road for the intentions of the school. They're showing 2 roads with a traffic circle, and essentially that is unnecessary at this point. So on that note, staff does not agree that they meet this criteria. Again, if this was a PD, this would be a different question. The last point, D, is authorization of this variance change the character of the site. And we worked with the applicants, and they did revise their mitigation plan, and they are offering a very generous mitigation plan of 1-to-1. And because of this, staff agrees that they do meet this condition. for the variance criteria, and it would not substantially deter the character of the site because they would be replanting with a generous amount of trees and with native trees. So because the applicant does not meet all 4 criteria, staff has to deny the variance based on that. It's mostly based on the idea that the roadway can be routed on other locations of the site or reconfigured to more appropriately fit the use of the school specifically. So we would recommend denial to remove the 22 grand trees. We do have conditions for the approval. So if approved by the board, we would want the civil plans of the proposed roadways, that they must be approved prior to the removal of the grand trees. That the applicant shall mitigate the loss of any grand trees in substantial conformance with the mitigation plan as shown in the attachment. And that all mitigation planting shall be completed prior to the release of the improvement guarantee funds for proposed roads. And then lastly, the applicant shall submit a tree protection plan which adequately protects the remaining grand trees with grading or civil construction plans.
Can you explain number 3?
Number 3?
The condition, yes.
Josh, is that a question you can answer?
Tony knows. Well, they have to provide up bonds for the roadways, and before we release the bonds, essentially is how the mitigation has to be completed prior to that. So,
Before you release the bonds,
correct.
and that's the guarantee funds, the bond. Okay.
Yeah.
Bond, I may have understood. Okay.
All right.
I never heard of guarantee funds.
No.
Okay.
So that concludes the presentation, and now I'm open for questions.
Were you provided with alternative access to Mount Holly Road?
No.
Okay.
I think last time we had this meeting, I think the applicant pretty much told us that the staff requested this road here, located here. Is that true?
I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again?
I said last month's meeting, I believe, if I remember correctly, the applicant stated that staff requested this road to be located here. Is that not accurate?
To my understanding, no.
It was DOT.
DOT.
Yeah,
wanted that.
If I may clarify a little bit, the planning director and myself did meet with the applicant, and we did go over, they did go through some different renderings with the school, with the SCDOT regarding the school, location of the school and stacking, but most of that, and the applicant may be able to clarify this better when he gets to it, and I think from what I glanced at real quick, we'll have to take a recess and get their PowerPoint up and stuff, but I think they may have some of those renderings in their PowerPoint as well. But most of I think it's important to note, most of what the school, what the DOT was looking at was the stacking for the school and the stacking off-site for school. They don't want any stacking out on the public roads.
Right.
They wouldn't have necessarily said, yes, this is where we want that road going exactly. If they presented as this is where we want it, will it work? Then they say, yeah, well, maybe put a roundabout in here to help the traffic flow and things like that.
Gotcha.
But the applicant may be able to get more into what they were specifically discussed with Mark Falk and SCDOT at that point. So.
But DOT doesn't weigh any tree protection in that decision at all or anything, though, do they?
No, at this point,
Yeah.
that early in the process, they would have looked at, and they wouldn't have considered the trees or anything like that. They were looking at school bus stacking, car drop-off line stacking, things like that, and they want it to be self-contained on the school site. From a roadway standpoint, that's more of a local district office, and they look in and say, we want to put the road here, and DOT looks at it and goes, well, as long as it meets everything in our arms manual from a site distance and all this other stuff, we're okay with it, basically.
So with your experience with DOT, do they look at any tree removal? I mean, is that on their radar at all?
Not that I'm aware of, as long as it's out of the site triangle.
Yeah.
You know, so, unless it's an angel oak or something. I don't know.
That's draining.
So when you met with the applicant, did you visually show any alternative plans, and were you, as you know, the county believes, other alternatives could be that would minimize the grand tree number?
To my understanding, I was out of those conversations, but to my understanding, no. I think Josh can probably provide some clarification on this.
Say, ask the question again.
So, in our packet, it says that staff believes there's alternate plans that would save more, grand trees. When you guys met, did you offer up
No,
any of those plans, or did that
And
not
they'll, most of the options all kind of centered around the access point being in the same location of what they presented to DOT that we saw. And it's been about a year or so ago, I guess, when they first met with DOT and started discussing. But all of them kind of centered around the same basic locations of where they are. From staff's standpoint, they never really explored anything to the south or anything like that, and that's kind of where that's coming from.
Okay. So you're saying there's alternative options using a different ingress egress off of 901?
Potentially, yes.
Yes.
Potentially.
And we don't believe those options have been explored.
Okay.
That's why the staff report is
Okay.
written the way it is.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right. Any further questions for Peter? No? At this time, we will take another 5-minute break so that the applicant can get his slide set up to show. We have the presentation available.
Thank you very much. My name is Craig Craze, and I reside in Rock Hill. My business partner, Nick Radovanovich, and I own the land for which we're requesting the variance to the York County Grand Tree Ordinance. Let me first start by thanking the staff for figuring out the technology issue. I probably needed that bottle of scotch at the beginning of this meeting when I found out that I might not have access to my presentation, so I appreciate them pulling it together. Go here. So, at the end of last month's board meeting, which was a lengthy meeting, you guys gave us a clear directive. Come to a consensus with staff in terms of what the number of trees are that will be impacted by the proposed roads. And we worked with them, and we did come up with that number, and it is 22, as the staff previously mentioned. 17 pine, 2 poplar, and 3 sweet gum trees. We believe, after you look at all of the stuff that we've covered, that there is a lot of, or many, reasonable, thoroughly vetted, well thought out reasons that enable the staff and you as a board to justify this variance. Let me first start with the Grand Tree Ordinance itself, and I'm going to just read it. Grand Tree, a tree or group of trees considered to be important community assets due to their unique or noteworthy characteristics. These are grand trees. These trees are worth saving, designing around, making great efforts to save. These trees are not grand trees. There's nothing unique or noteworthy about these. As a matter of fact, between the Fuel family and the Craze family, we have 200 acres of land around Kettlesong that look just like that. So they are not unique or noteworthy. Second, in the ordinance, it says a tree may be considered a grand tree based on its size. Note the operative word may. There is no requirement that we take a 24-inch tree and declare that it's a grand tree simply based on its size. Now, if you go further into the ordinance, there are additional reasons that I think justify this variance. If you look at the section where the staff has the opportunity to provide administrative approvals, the staff has worked with us and they've identified trees that were unhealthy, and they said those should not be considered, and we're grateful for that. There's also this item, number 2, the location of grand trees on property would cause detriment to public well-being in regards to the placement of proposed utilities. Ladies and gentlemen, we have utilities running under New Indigo Street and Rattlebush Road. That, to me, is a very legitimate reason that staff could say we could administratively approve this variance. If you dig farther yet into the ordinance, there are reasons that you as a zoning board of appeals could review and consider. Now, there are 4 items here. We discussed those ad nauseum last month. and so let me just say, the staff and my team, we don't agree on everything. But there are things that we do agree upon, and I think if we looked at those with the vision of how to move forward, I think that a variance could be justified even at this level based on those things. Now note, we have an appendix, and we're prepared to debate every point ad nauseum if we want to. And let me assure you, we are well prepared on that point. But I think at the end of the day, we just need to keep kind of the big picture in mind. And if I may, as you consider this variance request, the big picture and what's at stake, it's not just these trees. Let me just say, development, it's a complex endeavor. And when we're trying to create a nature-oriented, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use community like Kettlesong, it's especially complex. It has homes, it has businesses, it has schools, restaurants, public parks. Each of these have their own challenges that requires to balance the demands of topography, natural resources, roads, utilities, stormwater management, zoning, market demands, and financial limitations. All of these things are things that we have to balance. And it is a difficult balancing act, but I would put forward that it's worth it. Because in the end, we're working and collaborating, not only within our team, but also with the government, to work to create something that's wonderful. We're trying to create communities here. These are wonderful places to live. places where families can grow and they can thrive. It's a good way for us to spend our time to build good and wholesome communities. We believe that good government facilitates such endeavors. It encourages and incentivizes the development of communities like Kettle Song, a project that we believe will set a precedent for high-quality development in southeastern York County, as well as preserve many acres of rural land as part of the community. We truly believe that our request to remove 18 pines, 2 poplar trees, and 3 sweet gum trees is a justifiable and reasonable one. It is the very removal of these trees that will allow us to develop among the many true grand trees that are on the property, keeping those trees and protecting them for generations to come by weaving them into the fabric of the community. So tonight, I hope you'll see the reason of our request, and as a team, I hope you'll consider the larger vision as you consider your vote on this variance. Thank you very much.
Mr. Grace, one thing we were talking about is the alternative access.
Yes.
Have you looked at alternative access locations?
Yes, so if I may, I'd like to turn the time over to Kelly Clayton, who has years of experience working on building schools and roads. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Kelly, and I'm going to cue this up for you, Kelly.
Hang on one second before you do.
Yes.
Earlier we looked at 17 pine trees. There was 22 total.
3 sweet gum trees and 2 poplar trees.
All right, you just to clarify, you said 18 pine trees. I just
I'm
want to make
sorry.
sure we're still on the same page
Yeah,
here.
sorry.
17. Okay.
I should be wearing my glasses. I apologize.
Just check.
So Kelly, if you come on up here, I'm going to turn this over to you on this item.
And while Kelly comes up, I'd like to just clarify, the rest of the definition of a grand tree says examples include large hardwoods such as oaks, poplars, maples, and the like, and softwoods such as pine species in good or better condition with a DBH of 24 inches or greater. So I just want to, there's a little, pine trees are included. Doesn't sound like it when you hear the first part, but it says examples and it specifically lists softwoods. So I just want to make sure that's out there.
Yes, good evening, Kelly Clayton with Lightner Construction, 312 Pendleton Street, Rock Hill. So we were brought on board over a year ago, initially representing YPA, to get the school started, to get the school designed, and over the course of that design meetings, obviously it involved DOT. So when you're doing schools, you're dealing with state DOT. You're not dealing with local staff or local DOT for school access, right? So the first meeting that we had was with Mark Falk on June 25th of 2020. And this was the initial plan that we presented to him. And you can see there are multiple access points, one of them being directly across from the 5-point interchange where Neely's Creek and Collins Road all come together, which is not a good spot, right? And that was immediately pointed out by DOT that, hey, this is not where you want an access. And there were some other recommendations regarding on-site stacking and driveways and drop-off loops and that sort of thing that were brought up as well. Follow that up with another meeting on July 29th, 2020, where we moved the southern access further north and then reworked the drop-off loops, trying to separate the two, but we could not make the two separate stacking drop-off loops meet the 2,000 linear foot of stacking requirement, again, by DOT. That is a DOT mandate. And during that same meeting, Mark did not want that second access to the south shown because of the distance, again, associated from the 5-point interchange. We could not get the turn lanes and tapers in for that second point without interfering with that 5-point interchange. Okay. So the third meeting, August 27th of 2020, we came back with a single access off of Mount Holly with a roundabout, and the purpose of the roundabout is so that you don't slow traffic down that's entering the site, trying to make a left-hand turn that would eventually back it up on Mount Holly. So we came up with the roundabout idea to keep the traffic moving until you reach the on-site stacking road, which is in the red arrows. Okay. So this was iteration number 3, and it got us closer to where we needed to be with stacking. And then our final meeting was October 8th of 2020, and this is when we actually visited the site. And it was at this time when we had all of the information regarding the wetlands that you now see shown on the drawing. And so that's why the Rattlebush Road, as it was named further down the road, why it bowed out a little bit to try to avoid as many of the wetlands and environmentally sensitive areas. So this was the plan that Mark approved at the state level, and then he sent his approval into county, local DOT, and county staff, and it's in your packet. And his write-up approving this is included in the packet. And this, again, this meets the 2,000 linear foot of stacking. That's a mandate by DOT. And I will point out that the access that is chosen hits 0 grand trees, 0. And it's at the highest point of Mount Holly Road, so it allows the best sight distance in both directions, and it avoids the 5-point interchange where you get into a curve further down the road. So this was the best case scenario for everyone, in our opinion, because it didn't hit a single grand tree, and it provided the best sight distance for everyone from a safety standpoint. Now, obviously, once you get on site, you've got to connect the stacking road, which is an entrance only, to the exit. So that's where the interconnection of the lower portion of Rattlebush connects to the upper portion, and which is where we're getting into the trees. But again, we've got to get the kids and the parents out of the school, which is on the southern end. That's why, so it has to connect back up to the north. And we can't get out on the lower end to Mount Holly without hitting more trees. So the grand tree survey has been updated for all of Mount Holly now, and there are grand trees fronting Mount Holly all the way to the south to the property line. So if you tried to get a second access, we'll be back here again in front of you asking for another variance for more grand trees. So we felt like sticking to the one access at the north was the best solution. So again, there were several different iterations that we went through at county level. As Josh mentioned, we did meet with staff on July 29th and went through all of these drawings and all these iterations. So we felt like we did offer the alternate designs that you asked us to. Any questions?
I don't have any. Anybody else?
I think you covered what I was asking, but
Reagan? Anything?
My questions now.
I guess before we move on to another, I mean, technically, we already had the public hearing, right? So we wouldn't have to necessarily have that, but we could, right? But before we get into that, I had a question, and I'd like staff to kind of answer for me. When I'm looking at the tree conservation ordinance, section 155.533 is for residential development standards, residential, and that's what you're referring to here. 155.535, 534 is for non-residential standards. And for non-resident, and for that section, there's no mention of grand trees. And that's confusing to me because I read a lot of environmental regulations where they break sections out that pertain particularly, all right, so this pertains to this section, this pertains to this section. You know, maybe all we're talking about citrus fruit, but one's oranges and one's grapefruit. So when I'm looking at it saying, well, wait a minute, there's no mention of commercial development.
Except in the grand tree section.
But it's in the 533.
Yeah.
And it's not
I think
referred to.
Staff would agree, and I don't know that we need to get in this debate here. The title's a bit of a misnomer. The title would be inaccurate. However, and the county attorney could weigh in on this, but I believe the text is ruling, and the text is very clear about commercial, industrial, non-residential type development for grand trees. That's why grand trees have come before you before. That's why we've addressed this administratively with other commercial development and things like that. This is not, it's been in the code since, I think, 99 or 2000.
So nobody's brought this up before? Or?
It's come up before, and the determination's been made, and staff has operated under that determination, because it clearly states that this section shall apply to all new commercial, industrial, multifamily, and all of that, so.
I was just gonna say we had the same question.
Okay,
When we first got into it, we asked the same question to staff.
okay, so that, you were happy, you were,
And we had that
got it
discussion
resolved.
early on.
You resolved. Right, okay. All right, so yes, is there anybody here, we will open this up for public hearing? Anybody here to speak in favor of the variance request? That perhaps didn't speak last time? Anybody here to speak against it that perhaps didn't speak last time? Okay, seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do we have a motion from the board?
Motion to approve.
Second? All right,
I brought up earlier that or we kind of discussed last meeting and this meeting that we want, my biggest thing was why didn't we have an alternative route? But I believe, the gentleman did a good job of pointing out that DOT, and that is a bad intersection right there. You know, trying to time that, it's not good. So, I mean, I understand you gotta get some of the stacking in there. And when you talk about 2,000 big stacking, I mean, you can only work that in there so many ways. When it comes to the trees, you know, we're talking about pine trees. I just, you know, as much as I want to, I look at pine trees as a cash crop. And so I understand, the ordinance says 24 inches, but, you know, I think Reagan's gave us plenty of history lessons on these particular pine trees. So, I can definitely get on board with pine trees. We're talking about 2 poplar trees and 3 gum trees. I think that the cutting those down kind of outweighs the bad. So, I can get on board with that.
And I would just want to add that if this meeting was 6 months ago, we'd only be talking about 3 trees because the ordinance was 32 inches. So, you know, and again, to reiterate what Tony said, you know, most of them are pine. You know, they have a shallow root system. I mean, we're talking 2 poplar and 1 pine that are over 32 inches or more. So, you know, with a project this big, in my mind, you know, when this meeting was, you know, this drawing from this that's on our screen right now, October 8th, 2020, it was 32 inches in diameter. So, I mean, things have changed, things change and evolve, but, you know, 6 months ago, we wouldn't be talking 22 trees. So I think with a project this big, you know, we're gonna lose some trees unfortunately, but like you said, majority of them are pines, and they're gonna replace one by one with mitigation, and I think that's above and beyond, and I can work with that, so.
You know, back to that, council, I mean, I'm sure they intended well to change it to 24 inches, but I feel like it's gonna make a nightmare for us when we see it.
Yep.
Totally expect. And so, you know, again, pine trees, I mean, 24 to 32, whatever they are.
when I was looking at the 3 conditions, A, B, C, I tend to disagree with staff too, because I think because of the DOT requirements, the limited access, the large property with the wetlands that you're gonna have to cross, and that's where the grand trees are, in the wetlands. You're gonna have to cross them somewhere. So I disagree with the staff's conclusion. I think they do meet those criteria.
Yeah, but Barbara puts her hand on it. You know, and I have to say this, and I hope it doesn't offend. Well, if it does, I don't care if it offends anybody. Is that you come in here and give all these fancy presentations about building a community. Mount Holly's been there since the 1700s. The 3 counties, York, Chester, and Lancaster County, were founded at Fishing Creek Presbyterian Church, which is just about 6 miles away from that location. It's been a community for several hundred years. You aren't building anything but a big dam development to replace the community. Okay, now that I got that off my chest, please stop that manure wagon at future presentations for me. But in this case, I do agree, because I don't, on the 24 inch, like Barbara said, if they hadn't lowered it from 32, we wouldn't even be here. They wouldn't even have to get a variance. And my concern is still that the poor little guy from over here in Smyrna is gonna come up the 100 acres he planted, you know, for his grandkids 40 years ago, and all of a sudden they're 25 inches. And he's gonna have to get a variance. Now, and then I have one more question for staff. When this development's going on and these things are being cut, what happened to the 5 years you gotta wait to develop it when you cut all these trees down? In the
5
tree
years
ordinance,
is-
so I was on that committee when it was formed back then, and one of the things to do to stop track development, this kind of stuff, was you cut them, you gotta wait 5 years before you can develop it. Is that addressed or looked at by staff?
That's still in the code.
It's okay?
It is, yeah, it's still in the code that you have to wait 5 years if they were to go in, that's why they're before you tonight. If they were to go in and just start clearing without any permits or anything like that, then it is a 5 year that you can't do any development on the property other than agricultural purposes.
Right, because, yeah.
But if you were,
Clear cut, or is that thin as well?
it's
you could
still-
then, if it's agricultural use, if it's a planted tree farm, then that's different.
Yeah,
But if it's develop it, then it's 5 years. It's a 5 year penalty if you were to clear without any type of permits. Or if you were to cut down the trees, a grand tree with any type of permit, it's a 5 year penalty.
well, that's what I'm saying, this is a non-agricultural development.
And they haven't cut down anything
haven't
yet.
cut
That's
yet.
why they're here before you tonight.
Oh,
Okay,
I got you, okay.
any further?
That explains the variance
Yes.
completely, okay.
Any further discussion from board members? We have a motion to approve the variance. All in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. Next case, Z2134.
All right, on to the school. So now that the roadway has been approved, we will now be looking at the school site itself that is attached to the roadway here. So this is the same applicant, same property, same zoning, RC1, RUD. Here's the overall site plan. You can see here that it's a little difficult to see, but you can see here. There's the school. So we have Stacking Road up here. Here's Rattlebush here, New Indigo, 901. So you can see that the school is kind of situated right in the center of the site, on the banks of the wetlands, near the perennial stream as well. So the site itself is a little hard to see in the property boundary, but the site kind of runs along over here, runs down here. So they're developing a portion of the site. They're showing a gym within a location as well. You have the school there. Stacking entrance kind of runs around, parallel to the stream, crosses, and then up back around to meet their stacking requirements. So just like the roadway, they presented a grand tree survey. So they found a number of grand trees. We agreed on that same date on July 23rd that there are 12 grand trees that they would need to mitigate. And we would administratively approve of one of them that we agreed because of poor structural conditions and noticeable disease from sap seepage. Most of these trees are located along the banks of the wetlands. Here's the wetlands. And that's typically where you're gonna find most of your valuable hardwoods, your tulip poplars, sweet gums, maples, as such. Most of your pines are gonna be located in mesa upland areas where it's a little drier. Here's the one water oak up here. And then that's just documentation of the one water oak that we removed, and we looked at it from a horticultural perspective. Water oaks are a little faster growing, they're not as long lived. This is the same chart essentially that we presented in the last presentation. It includes a few more species of trees, including white oak. White oaks are going to be our longest living trees. Interval are between 300 and 600 years. There's only one of those though. Most of them are water oaks. Water oaks are going to be a little shorter lived, 175 to 100. Their data showed 175 to 175, which doesn't make sense, but that's what the data shows, so that's what we're presenting. Now this is an aerial site. You can see today it's mostly wooded, mix of hardwoods and pines, some planted, some natural. This is a historical aerial, basically just running through the same aerials that we showed from the roadway here. So you can see over time it gradually forests, becomes a little thicker, but there's still a little bit of open area as of 1980. But again, it's just more important to mention that most of those stacking road is intervening where most of those hardwoods are today. So they did present a mitigation plan just as they did for the roadway. So we asked for one mitigation, which they did. And this plan will just have to just be worked out during the construction plan stage, but the numbers are there. They're all native. Now we get into the variance criteria. So again, is this property exceptional? Does it have certain constraints that just can't be worked around within reason? So it's a similar answer to the first presentation with the road. The site's pretty large compared to the site at the school. You have quite a bit of land to the south and quite a bit of flatter upland slope with pine trees and such to the south there. That the road could essentially be relocated, Stacking Road. Stacking Road, again, is attached to the overall development and connecting to their gym and such. So again, staff is looking at this as an individual site. So, and there's a certain reason why we need to do this, because if for some reason there is an approval of the site and staff recommends approval of the site, and those developments that come after, if they don't get developed for some reason, then you have a derelict site. And then now essentially staff is accountable for that. So
When you have a what
a
site?
derelict site. So for instance, if you build a road based on the idea that Kettlesong is coming in the future, but for some reason Kettlesong doesn't come because it's not agreed upon at this point, then you have a derelict road that goes nowhere. That's happened in other communities. So we have to look at it from a parcel by parcel perspective, and that's how we're looking at the case. And so we're here to the board for y'all to make that decision. So again, this is going to be similar because there's ample space on the site. Staff feels that it could relocate the road in other areas to avoid grand trees. Again, we're looking at it just for access for the school specifically. So staff feels it does not meet the criteria. B, is this site similar to other sites in the area? Staff would say it's pretty typical of the other sites in the area. It has typical lowland areas, forested. Staff feels it does not meet this criteria. So C is the property, does the application of the code and regionally restrict the property from developing. So staff's analysis says that essentially no, it's just like A, there are opportunities to relocate the road in other areas of the site based on the sheer size of the site and based on the aspect that they're developing for the school specifically. So we would say that they do not meet that criteria. D, similar, just like the first case and for the roadway, they do offer a pretty generous mitigation plan. So because of that, we agree that they're not going to be substantially altering the character. So we do say that they do meet this criteria specifically. So because of that, of course, we need to recommend denial because they don't meet the 3 of 4. They don't meet all 4. They meet 1 of the 4. So we recommend denial of the 12 grand trees. If ZBA approves of the plans, similar conditions to the first, the roadway presentation, that civil construction plans for the school site, associated stacking road must be approved prior to the removal of grant trees. And then the applicant shall mitigate loss of the trees within substantial conformance with mitigation plan and an attachment. All mitigation planning shall be completed prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy by the South Carolina Office of School Facilities for the school. And then the last one, the school applicant shall submit a tree protection plan which adequately protects the remaining grant trees with grading and civil construction plans. So that concludes my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Now, there's 12 trees in this case. Now,
Yeah.
has anybody discussed an alternate, if you work with the applicant on alternates on how you move the road, where you move the road to avoid these trees or not? Are we back where we were a couple of meetings before last?
As far as I know, no.
But you feel like, y'all, staff feels like they could move this stacking road a little bit, tweak it around, avoid these trees? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we discussed with staff, and staff agrees that because we're just looking at it from the school perspective,
Yeah.
that they can simply access it on the south side, punch in a road there to access the school, and if they need to wind around a little bit to meet their stacking requirements, they have enough ample space to do so. It's just that, again, it's connected to the greater Kettle Song development. They need access on the north side because of the gym and the rest of the residential development, commercial development that's going to be proposed in the future, which is not approved on that site. So yes, based on the aspect that the school is going there specifically, only the school, staff feels that it is reasonable to request that the stacking road be relocated to a different location. And again, that stacking road is taking out a big swath of grant trees because it's running parallel. It kind of winds around and runs along that north side. Those are where most of the grant trees are. But on the flip side, again, you're still going to remove trees regardless of where you develop on the site. It's just a question of how many. And staff feels that you're removing more grant trees in that specific location on that north side because of how it runs parallel to the stream and then crosses. So
and what I'm trying to drive to is, all right, you're saying 12 is what they're wanting to take out in this case. I
Yeah.
notice there's some white oaks and stuff like that this go round, a little different. They can move that road. Are you gonna get down to where they only take out 2 or only take out 10? Or if these discussions happen?
they could potentially remove less if they show us options.
But you
But
feel
we've seen
it,
the one option. That's what we've seen.
okay. But you feel like I mean, let's be realistic. People aren't going to have to make a figure 8 loop through trees and stuff to get around to the stacking, are they? I mean, is it realistic? Is the staff looked at it that kind of detail or not?
Well, the staff looking at it from a grand tree standpoint only.
Only.
We try to look at it from multiple options, but again, I think what
I mean, is there plenty of room? Is there plenty of room or not?
Yeah, there's plenty of room.
Okay.
Will they remove trees? Yes. It's just a question of how many, and staff feels that they can remove less if they relocate it to a different area of the site specifically, so. So it's the same issue with the roads. Now, the applicant did present options that we had been looking for all along for the roadway approval. Again, for the roadway, for the school, we have been, as far as I know, it's the staff member have been presented with the one option. And we have to judge it on that one option.
Okay.
And when you mentioned punching a new road on the south side, you were referring back to Mount Holly Road, correct?
Yeah.
Which the applicant stated earlier that DOT did not think that was a great idea.
Because it was close to 5 points and the stacking and, yeah.
So yeah, take that into consideration.
No, I don't think he's talking about that.
No.
Talking about access, the access road that comes off Mount Holly to go south of the gym.
That's what he stated a minute ago, was that the other option was to go south and make a new access to Mount Holly Road, correct?
No, this is a stacking road.
Yeah.
Right?
Go to the south, say that again.
So when you say go to the south, what are you specifically meaning?
It would go back up, I'll go back to an earlier slide here.
Are you talking about Mount Holly Road, or are you talking within the,
Indigo Street.
I thought
Yeah.
it was Indigo. That's what I'm
Again, I want to say that we're not a traffic engineer, so we're not gonna pretend to act
No,
like we know
but-
where this is gonna go.
He's the tree engineer.
If you could only see the eye rolls behind you when you said that.
Okay. Point around.
So staff would say that, again, I haven't been part of these SCDOT discussions, so, we have to look at it from taking that out of the element for this discussion. So, that's up for y'all to decide and to question. And, I think Josh can probably fill y'all in a little more about those discussions pertaining to the potentially punching into the south.
I mean, you're looking at it from a tree standpoint, we understand that.
Yeah, I'm a landscape architect. I'm not
We
looking
have
at
to
trees.
take into account
Exactly.
all of the options, so.
Exactly. So and that's one of the reasons we're here.
But show me exactly what you're saying there.
So right now they're punching in here, but they have a school. Why can't they go here?
Okay.
Again,
So
it's
does
very
have a
reasonable.
901, yeah.
Very reasonable to state, there could be access conditions, but I don't know those. I haven't been presenting with those
Mhm.
ideas, so I can't make that call. So that's all I'm saying.
Gotcha. Just want to make sure we were
Yeah.
what you put down there.
Yeah.
And there's no bonds required for this? I know it's not one of the conditions, and I want to talk about that before we move on, but, yes,
Yes,
we did not, I know,
add
hold on.
conditions.
So there's no bonds required for this portion, for the roads to the gym? Okay.
No.
Okay. Any further questions, Peter? Thank you.
Okay.
I do want to interject on the last
Motion and
motion that we voted and approved. Let me ask, I think it was my intention to include the 4 conditions that were there
It was my
From the staff, yes.
from the staff.
Do we need to
So how do we,
do that now, or do we need to do that after we get done?
The simplest way to do it would be, once we're finished with this, we can go back and address that vote.
okay.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we assumed, I did too, all 4 of those were gonna be listed.
The little light bulb went on as soon as you talked about them.
Yep.
Do it.
All right. Would the applicant come forward?
Good evening, Brian Meyer with York Preparatory Academy. I live in Rock Hill currently. I lived in York County. We're moving to another place over there, but very excited to continue to work with school staff, with families of York County, and with the students of York County to help prepare a generation of students and children who value and love the environment, who will care for York County, much in the way that we're discussing tonight. It's almost ironic that we're here discussing the removal of some trees in order to address that a group of students need access to an area to learn to value them. And that's not lost on us at all. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about what we're talking about. Today was the first day of school. We had about 1,700 students here on campus, enjoying time with their teachers and learning in an environment that's been proven over the last 5 years to be one of the most successful schools in preparing students in York County. Sadly, 1,084 students on our waiting list were not joining us on campus today, which is why we need to build a second campus. As we mentioned before when we came before the board, we value adding more to our students than just reading, writing, and math. In this case, we feel like it's important for them to understand their place. And what that means is they owe a debt of gratitude and a duty to those who came before them, those who protected the environment, for those who put things in place, and they owe a debt of responsibility to those who will come after to preserve it. We need them to learn how to preserve it. In order for them to learn about it, they need to have access. And I'm the one who has this, so I'll change it. Part of the access that we're looking at it will include orchards, greenhouses, study of the forest and the trees and all of the living organisms in them, they will learn math and reading in the confines of nature, by counting tree rings, by counting insects, by writing about the things that they're seeing in nature. One area in which we do disagree with staff is on the value of this site. It is not like other sites. What makes it unique are the wetlands that surround it. We need the students to have access to those wetlands from their classrooms so that they can engage in learning with those ecosystems, which they would not be able to do on another site that's typical in York County that would not have wetlands surrounding them on 3 sides. Everything about our vision includes the protection and the teaching of students to solve problems about what we're facing in the environment. I have a great respect for communities who've been around since the 1700s. Sadly, we have communities coming from Charlotte, and the reason I'm moving, I mentioned I'm moving, and that's because the traffic that was hitting me out on the 5, where I used to live, was so much because so many people building in Charlotte and who are now moving their buildings south that we're losing some of these opportunities. This school is an opportunity to teach students about the importance of preserving them and the value for us in losing 12 trees is so that they'll have access to be able to learn about these sites and be able to develop the knowledge that they will need to preserve those in the future. We're talking in 20 years from now. And so I hope that the board will consider our request to replace 12 trees that are there now with several more native species trees that will be able to grow in their place over the years. Thank you. I'll now turn some time over to Josh.
Where I'm on school, I don't have any PowerPoints. Some phone boards. All right, my name is Josh Van. I practice with Morton and Geddes in Rock Hill. I think my partner Dan was here in front of y'all last time. He's on family vacation, so I get to fill in for him. I want to just briefly discuss a point that Mr. Quarles brought up a little bit ago. The ordinance that we're talking about is in section 155.533 entitled Residential Development Standards. That's not just the caption. Subpart B of the ordinance indicates that the following requirements will be considered to apply to residential lots. That's the text, that's not the caption. Subpart 7 is one of those following requirements that subsection B indicates will apply to residential lots. So I think there's a big question as to whether or not this ordinance is even applicable. If it is, it was certainly poorly drafted and confusing. But assuming that it is applicable, because we are here, what does the ordinance actually say? What does a grand tree defined as? As Craig Crazy indicated a little bit ago, the ordinance defines a grand tree as a tree or group of trees considered to be important community assets due to their unique or noteworthy characteristics. That definition does not include size. The ordinance then goes on to say that a tree may be considered a grand tree due to its size. Y'all probably know the word may because you were a kid and your parents said you may do something. They didn't say you must do it or you shall do it. It wasn't a mandate. They were allowing you to do it. May is permissive. It's not obligatory. Staff has taken the position that any tree that meets the 24-inch diameter is automatically a grand tree, but that's not what the ordinance says. And we understand why staff must take that position, because otherwise they'd be in the precarious predicament of having to evaluate whether a particular tree is noteworthy or has unique characteristics. And that's not a job really that council should have put on them. So we get why they're making that assumption, but the ordinance does not say that a tree is automatically a grand tree due to its size. These trees here are not unusually large, and they are not uncommon. Staff's report indicates that they are present from New York to Florida to Texas. That's about half the country. These are not trees that are unique to this area, and they are not unusually large trees like the trees that Craig put up on the board earlier. So it is difficult, given these facts, to conclude that these trees are noteworthy or have unique characteristics. But just assuming they do meet the definition of grand trees, we're down to the requirements of a variance. And staff, I think, indicates that they're on board with subpart D. There's no disagreement there. So the disagreement is as to A, B, and C. A is, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular property. Staff believes that the property is large and that the road can be moved. The site is actually very small for a school. I want to point out, this area right here, which you've seen, is 19 acres. Kelly Clayton has built a lot of schools, and that's very small for an elementary and middle school site. Most sites would be at least 25 acres. This area down here is an additional roughly 17 acres. The reason why it's attached on the drawing is it's not actually a part of the school site. Right now, the Roundabout Road does not exist. So this 19 acres has no frontage on public road. This is being included for the sole purpose of meeting the frontage requirement. The school was not intended to build any buildings here, nor could it. There are wetlands here, you see a giant pond here. Putting a road out here would be pretty much an impossibility. So this is not a part of the site plan. This 19 acres is part of the site plan. At such time as this road is completed, Rattlebush, and is dedicated to public use, allowing the school site to meet the road frontage requirement, this will be reconveyed to the development. It is not part of what will be developed. If it were, there's some grand trees in there too. So the proposed plan actually uses all of the usable area of the site. There's not much there that's not wetland that you can see or a pond that the school isn't making good use of. The stacking road, as we discussed earlier, DOT's mandate is 2,000 feet. So we've got a 19-acre site where we've got to get 2,000 linear feet of stacking road. And due to the nature of the site, the only way you can get that and end up with any area to put a school is to run all the way across and come all the way back. So going across and go back to give you maximum distance. They cross the wetland here at the most narrow point, which has been approved. Certainly crossing at any other point would impose a greater adverse effect on wetlands, and so the only natural point to cross is where it has been shown here, and that as land design has designed it. The wetland and pond areas on this property are unique. You know, so subpart A is, are there exceptional conditions? Yes, there are. This site is full of wetlands. It is different than most areas. I have a lot of friends in Mount Holly. I spend a fair amount of time over there. And this amount of wetlands is not the norm for that part of the county. So I think it is exceptional and it is unique. Subpart B is these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. The natural conditions that are present on this site, again, are not typical of the surrounding area. Most properties do not contain wetlands and certainly do not contain wetlands of the size and large area of those here. So we believe that staff's determination that the natural conditions found here are typical of those in the area is not a correct determination. Element C is because of these conditions, the application of this chapter to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. Because of the wetland and the pond areas, the only way to develop this property is to affect grand trees. If you're going to operate around those wetlands, there's no way you're going to develop this site and not impact grand trees. We're talking about building a school here and only impacting 12, maybe grand trees. The school itself only affects one, actually buildings. Most of these are Staff believes that there's a better way to lay the site out, but we haven't been presented with one. And land design hasn't been able to come up with one, and that's what they do. We know that staff is looking at this individually and not in combination with kettle song. DOT doesn't do that though. DOT doesn't look at it that granularly. They're not gonna allow us access here or here. They've already determined that the access has to be as shown. And so we're operating under the confines of what DOT is requiring. And again, they're looking at this holistically. They are looking at this as being developed in concert with and as a part of Kettle Song, not as a standalone project, which staff is forced to do. This really all comes down to reasonableness. The applicant meets all three criteria where there's a disagreement with staff. The applicant is offering a very generous mitigation plan, as staff has noted, almost twice what the city of Rock Hill would require. And it is unreasonable for staff to assume, to start with, that every tree that's 24 inches or greater in diameter is automatically a grand tree, because that is not what the ordinance requires. That's not the definition. So we request that the board grant the variance with the conditions noted by staff, other than we have to plant these trees at the right time of year, or this mitigation plan will not work. If we're gonna get a CO in August to open the school, we can't plant the trees in July. We're gonna have to plant them in November. So the only condition that we would ask this board vary from is that we be allowed to plant the trees at the appropriate time of year. Because we're not offering the mitigation plan up just to check a box. We want it to work. Any questions?
So you wouldn't have any problem with a 2-year life minimum on the mitigation trees? If you could get into the time of year you want to plant them, most nurseries even give you 2 years of life on that plant. So y'all wouldn't have any problem if you got it down to where you could plant them in the wintertime, then you would come back and you'd have to replace everything that died within 2 years.
You're basically asking for a bond to guarantee the survival of the trees. I mean, I'm counsel, that's a business point, I can't speak to that. I do think it sounds reasonable, as you indicate, many nurseries offer a warranty.
Yeah.
And certainly, if the applicant could buy those trees from a nursery with the appropriate warranty, then we want those trees to survive, and we ensure that they do. But certainly, planting them at the right time of year is a big start in that direction.
Well, you don't have to water them if you do them in the wintertime, so you want to get something, you need to give something.
Well, that's right. You don't have to water them if that's exactly right. They're dormant. That's why the root system takes up in the winter, and in the spring, they're ready to roll.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any further questions? No?
Y'all got someone else coming up? Ray, you wanna ask the applicant that same question you just asked?
Thank you, ladies.
About the
2 year.
the 2 year. Well, I mean, if they've got deadlines to meet, my whole point was, are y'all willing to put a 2-year life requirement? In other words, you go out there and stick all these trees in the ground, half of them die, whoop-de-doo, mow them next go round, fella, get rid of them. No, if you want more time on the mitigation plan, then we ought to make, okay, they've got to live 2 years.
Yeah.
If they're gonna die within 2 years, they ain't gonna die.
Going back to that condition 3, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mitigation planting,
I'm all for, let's do this in discussion. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Applicant, good with that before we move on and try to, if we were to approve it, put that on there.
My only problem with this one is like the last meeting, but I guess we need to wait till we have a motion to discuss it.
all right, no further input from the applicant. Open public hearing. Anybody to speak in favor of the variance request?
I'm in favor, and also didn't want to violate your parliamentary procedures. When you do get back to considering the conditions for the approval that you gave earlier, which we're grateful for, there are some specific things that I don't know if there'll be an opportunity for me to share. Certainly the oncoming annexation. If there was a bonding issue, obviously that creates a lot of complexity, right? All of a sudden we're with the city. So when we get to that point, if there's an ability for us to share some thoughts on those before you amend the motion, we'd appreciate it. And Reagan considered the manure wagon unhitched. So we're good. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Anybody else speak in favor of the variance request? Anybody here to speak against the variance request? Okay, seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do we have a motion from the board?
I make a motion to deny, because I think there's some more things we need to add. So I'm looking for a second.
What do you mean to add?
Well, I have to get a second before we can talk about it.
I'll second to get discussion going.
We are back where we were meeting before last. They aren't talking. These are white oaks and water oaks they're taking down this time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there a road ability to move that road or not? And here we go again, just like the meeting before. Have y'all talked? No. Have you looked at each other's options? No. He didn't give me nothing. I didn't give him nothing. Same old game again. Now, do we congratulate that with giving them a variance? Or do we make them go back, if they want a variance, and provide us with enough information? I don't know whether or not they can move the road right now and only take out one tree for the school or not.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all? Because did they sit down and hash it out? No. And so once again, that's why I'm kind of on the fence. Y'all know I believe, you know my thoughts. I made them real clear last time about pine tree cutting and stuff. But once again, you know, every little piece of this, here we come, one thing at a time. Because they're not sitting down. And I don't mean to criticize, I guess I'm armchair quarterback, call me that if you want to. But why don't y'all sit down and work all these things out and have the answers to these questions? Options should have been looked at for that road, an internal road. Nobody's got any to show us. And that's frustrating to me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because I don't know whether or not they can put that road around, none of us do, whether they can put the road without touching the trees. You see what I'm saying? That's just my feelings. That, you know, y'all may disagree with me, and you're welcome to. It just seems like it'll be, as you get into this kettle song and everything else, they're gonna be here every meeting with another variance, which they have to do, I'm sure, during this construction. Mm-hmm. But it ought to be dialed in a little better before they bring it here. Mm-hmm. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure a lot of work went into putting the road where it was. A lot of communication with DOT.
Well, I'm talking about the stacking road. That are there. Yeah, that's my question. Is we got staff saying they could have moved it. There are alternatives.
Right.
Where are they?
Yeah. Well,
so
did staff look at these trees as well when you went out and discussed the trees with the motion, the earlier motion? Did you look at these trees to assess them?
We did.
Okay. So you stand by this number and?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Since there's consensus amongst the applicant and us that there are 12 trees, and
okay.
They're all healthy enough, and they should be there for a long time. So.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'm being mean old grandpa. I won't teach him a lesson. He either sit down and talk.
No, and I agree.
Send him back home.
I agree with what you're saying. I just think that, you know, it's 2,000 foot of road. It doesn't matter where it goes on here. We're gonna have, and I'm not saying that we don't get down 10 trees or 2 trees, right. but it's somewhere on here, we're gonna be taking out grand trees.
And again, if we went 6 months ago, we'd only be talking 3 trees.
That's right.
But I agree with you. You know, if this keeps coming up,
it's just gonna keep like this.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, you guys will have to come more together to bring us more information, and so we can make a decision based on the most information possible, I guess. So it's frustrating, but.
Yeah, it's real frustrating. And anyway, that's my reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be an unreasonable thing, but
Well, I kind of agree with, like, Barbara. You're gonna be getting some trees down.
Oh, I know.
You know, whether it's
And they are
12 or 10.
And they are avoiding wetlands, so they have to kind of snake their way
Yeah.
around the wetlands.
It's 2,000, it's
2,000
2,000 foot, I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, you gotta go up, come across, go back. So at some point, you know,
Well, what we ought to do, at least at this juncture, if somebody makes another motion and mine fails, then, we'll at least put the monkey on them for the next go round.
Correct.
There's gonna be another one, and another one, and another one. And, it goes through, because the bottom line is, they built the school down there by their own pictures and thing, all in the middle of the wetlands for the beautiful ponds and things they're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of dry ground over there. They didn't have to put school there. But that
Mhm.
card's already,
That's
that
already
ship's
done.
already
Yeah.
sailed.
Mhm.
So I'm not going there. So I don't have a lot of pity for the, because of the wetlands thing.
Yeah.
Okay? But I'm like you. To put in that much road, I've run a dozer myself. You gonna knock a bunch of trees down, to get through there. So, and it is in the woods, so.
I did want to mention, I forgot this from the presentation, but the school itself, they're removing, I think, 1 or 2 grand trees from the school site. The majority of the grand trees are going to be removed from the stacking road specifically.
Right. We understood that.
Well, and I'd like to just add another point of clarity. You know, staff's job is to review what's submitted. We
I know.
don't do designs. We don't make other recommendations of, hey, draw it here or things like that. We review what is submitted and compare that to the code. And we interpret the code. We can argue over what's a grand tree or not. We've made the determination these are grand trees. If we want to argue whether they're grand trees or not, there's a whole nother administrative process for that to appeal staff's decision of whether they're grand trees or not. They've been deemed grand trees. That's not an issue. And again, we can't really design the site for them. That's a whole,
Yeah.
that's, we have to go off what's presented to us and review it from that standpoint, so.
Good point.
Yep.
That's a very good point.
Yep.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion to deny the variance. All in favor of the motion to deny, raise your right hand.
Since I made it.
All right, so we need another motion.
No, you have to do the other one. That was to approve the denial. What about yeah, against the denial? You only did the one.
Okay, I'm voting against the denial,
Y'all
raise your right hand,
hey.
sorry.
I just want to be on record.
Yeah, you're right. Some of y'all could have abstained.
We all help each other.
All right, so now we need another motion.
motion to approve with staff conditions 1, 2, and 4. And Reagan, can you repeat what your recommendation was earlier?
Like for number 3 on the mitigation plan, it was to add to that all the plannings of the mitigation must be replaced if they die within 2 years of the planning.
So, motion approved with staff condition 1, 2, and 4, and edit 3 to say that the applicant will.
Yeah, add it to that. It's just add it to that.
Or add to that, that the applicant will warranty the mitigation for 2 years.
For 2 years.
Let's get some clarification from the applicant to make sure that wording is the way it should be and understood.
From the applicant or staff?
I think that Mr. Craig's ask on that was in response to being allowed to plant them at the appropriate time of the year, which I think would be the other.
At the
Which is
optimal time?
Removing the 3.
Yes.
Right, so that would be the other modification to the 3.
Yeah.
So you'd still want the 2-year replacement, but timing,
Yeah, for
the
example.
optimum planning time.
Exactly. Let's say it's August, and they're let me clarify what I think y'all think I want, is to get their CO, okay? Well, it's August or now, July, all right? you go plant them now, they're all gonna be dead. Because it's too dry and it's too hot for trees. But then when you plant them, we could say within the first upcoming season, they need to live 2 years beyond that point. So then they start planting trees in November, December, January, February. At that point in time, they gotta live 2 years beyond that.
So you call it a planting season defined by months?
Just in the proper planting season.
Optimal.
First appropriate. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think
Because what you,
recommendation 3 is to guarantee that they get that mitigation done by,
Right.
and I mean, we're gonna hold CO over your head until it's done. So I'm just trying to read through here and make sure that, you know, I know we're saying how you're gonna warranty what you plant, but how do we guarantee that they're planting what they are supposed to be planting? So I just wanna make sure that that is covered in there.
well, what I'm trying to do is you be a little lenient, for example, you want to live 2 years. You give them a CO in May. Like, then they lose all that time. Once they plant them 2 years from that date. That's what I was trying to get across. Give them that flexibility, you know, regard to the proper planting time of the year.
To assure.
And then they gotta live 2
yeah.
years past
No,
that.
I completely, I'm on board with that. I just, how do you know, kind of hold them to the fire and make sure they're, what do we, how do we word that to make sure at the end of that 2 years that all those trees that are supposed to be there are there?
You can't tie it to the CO then again,
That's what I'm saying, there's nothing.
If I might add, I mean, the whole point of this is to getting the trees in prior to CO. If they were to die at some point in the later, then it becomes a code enforcement issue where they're violating part of the condition that was approved or something like that. And at that point, we would handle it administratively.
So we don't even need to add.
So how long do they have to live?
Are you saying that if we put a 2-year stipulation on it and then they die?
It'd be like any other buffer or landscaping that would be done on a commercial site. I mean, we have commercial businesses that get COs in June, July, and August, and typically they're irrigated. So they do live and they do survive. Some of them don't, at which point it becomes a code enforcement issue. And if we get a complaint and we go out and investigate and they're dead trees, then we require them to replace them.
But York County does not have a mitigation plan as part of the tree ordinance. So what are you gonna enforce?
The condition, the mitigation plan that you're about to agree with tonight.
Does it have, so that's what he's kind of
What
getting
happens when it
at.
gets
Is it got
annexed?
2 years worth in there?
It's out of our hands.
I mean, all you gotta do is take a pine planter, go there and plant all
So
the
that's
darn
why we
trees.
wanna
If they
set
die
it
next
in
year, who
that.
cares?
Well,
That's what everybody did out on the river 15
One
years
of us
ago.
will have to drive by there in 2 years and say, hey, call code enforcement, we got a problem. That's what I'm trying to get at here. How do we word this to guarantee that this is done and it's kept up for 2 years?
Yeah.
And then what happens if it gets annexed? Does that change it?
Well, we can't control the annexation
Okay.
if it gets annexed
So-
or not. And if it's annexed, it's out of our jurisdiction, so we have no control over it.
Well, I'm saying, but we have control now, so that's why, you know,
Maybe we're splitting hairs.
How long does it take to construct it? The building?
I think they want fall next year.
All right.
3 months?
Pardon? Oh, okay, so.
So you got time to plant it in the optimum planting time?
I did want to,
No. I mean, cause you say, hey, you start tomorrow, we're gonna fire a bulldozer up and start pushing. We can't plant trees next week, you know?
Well, you're gonna have the shell of the building, you're gonna
Yeah, but
get curbing.
I don't know how many construction sites you've been on. I mean, those.
Landscaping is usually the last thing that finishes.
Better
up.
be.
Yeah, but the punch out guys is liable to take them all out on the way out of the job site.
Is this plan on, is there gonna be any irrigation with these trees? In the plans? Likely not, okay.
I did want to comment on the planting seasons and the planting preferences. Like I said, I'm a landscape architect here in South Carolina and registered in a couple in another state as well. So I have quite a bit of experience with this, but it's pretty common to plant all year round. I mean, he is right, the applicant is right. It is common, it is preferred to plant in the fall, the spring, because it's cooler conditions, better for the root systems and growth and that such. But it is not unreasonable to plant during the summer. There is an expectation that they are taken care of and they are irrigated. There is an establishment period for any plantings for 1 to 2 months, give or take, depending on the species, depending on the season. But it's not unreasonable to plant them during the summer. I
I mean, if you're not gonna take care of the plants, they're gonna die regardless, pretty much of the season, unless you happen to be lucky and it rains. But you still need to water them, take care of them, and nurture them for the first couple months of their life, regardless. So I just want you to be aware of that.
So, why don't we put an inspection 6 months after a CO? Get some time to plan, get it done, and I know that kind of puts ball back on code enforcement staff, but at least then, I mean, somebody's gonna check it before there's an issue, before they issue a CO anyway, so somebody can go check it 6 months later to make sure, but I just don't know, I mean, it didn't, like, Josh said, rather than it becomes code enforcement issue and they're in violation. So, how would y'all feel about putting a 6-month clause on it? I just wanna make sure that it's done and they're held accountable.
For
make sure that it's done.
planning income?
For, yes. That, you know, they're saying that, you know, don't make us plan them before the CO, because it might not be optimal planning time. So if we give them another 6 months, then they should have enough window in there to get them planted and for everything to be in place. I just don't want to turn them loose here. I'm not saying that they won't, but I don't want to turn them loose in this. I mean, we're here, we're taking grand trees out, and part of my big deal is
The one for one.
we're putting these back.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that these are put back and they're checked, to make sure that they're,
So is that something the board can put on that, on
I think
the
the
organic?
whatever they want to on there, can't they?
Legally?
To a certain extent.
Josh, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that first.
You know, it's almost like any other condition that would be provided by the ZBA. If y'all, it would be up to applicant to meet that condition, and if they don't, then, you know, they're in violation. I don't, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 6 months, I don't know. We have staff members that attend the school, and some will be at this campus, and we have some that are at the current campus now. You know, they'll let us know typically if they see something.
So 20 years from now, if one of these trees is dead, somebody can turn them in and they'll be in violation.
20 years from now, I'm gonna be retired,
Right,
so.
well, me too, but I mean, there's got to be a statute of limitations on it.
Yeah.
At some point. I mean, I know we're splitting hairs here, I just wanna make sure that it's somehow enforced.
The only reason I brought it up to get it on this is because from what I've heard the last several meetings, York County does not have any mitigation plans with rules and regs and codes in them like the city of Rock Hill does. Okay, they have a mitigation model in their ordinances and everything. This is what you gotta do, exactly what you and I are talking about. And York County does not have that. So what's gonna happen is if all the trees die next year and somebody complains, you're gonna call them, they're gonna go, we don't have a mitigation plan. And we're not gonna do anything about it.
So.
But if it's part of your approval today, then they become under violation. And they have to either plant the trees back or come back before you and amend the variance that they received to not put the trees back.
So it'll be planning in accordance with,
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, all right, here's, sorry.
well, if you tie it back to it's got a mitigation plan, right?
Yeah.
There's a mitigation
Yes.
plan, which is the planning. So if you tie it to that, to the final approved mitigation plan, right? Because right now, it's not final. Is it?
I don't think so, I mean, I know the one before was final, but I'm sure this one's probably.
Is this mitigation plan approved?
Yeah, we agree upon this.
Yes, okay.
We'll have
Okay.
to work out some things in the field though, when construction plans, come through, because maybe you have their separate school plans that come in, and we need to make sure that they coexist with their, other coded plantings as well. So that can be worked out though, pretty easily.
All right, so, we're just gonna take out 3. And it sounds like, if they're in violation, it's gonna kind of work itself out. Y'all good with that?
No, we're not gonna take out 3.
No, we're gonna take out 3.
You're gonna
modify the question. So we're gonna approve it with my suggestion was to approve it with condition 1, 2, and 4.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking, never
You were
mind.
looking at 2, right?
I'm looking at 2, yeah, and thinking it's 3, I got you, okay.
So I make a motion to approve with conditions 1, 2, and 4.
From an administrative perspective, if you take out 3, when do they install the
Yep.
There
mitigation?
we are again.
Well, the thing is,
Way to
if
full
you
circle,
tied it to
didn't
that within 6 months
So, there you go, all right.
of CO, they have to meet the mitigation plan.
Yeah, give them 6 months.
The mitigation plan's finalized as far as we know.
All right, they have to act upon the mitigation plan, how implement the
Meet-
mitigation plan, how about that?
meet the
Within
con- meet
6
the
months,
conditions.
The mitigation plan has to be implemented.
I think that's sufficient.
Okay. All right, Ace, you got all that?
So how do y'all wanna word it for change it?
Just mitigation plan shall be implemented within 6 months of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Work good.
Yeah.
And let it go, we beat it to death.
We figure it out, though.
Need a second.
Oh, do we have a second?
Yes.
Oh,
Do we have a second?
No.
oh, I'll second.
Okay.
Sorry.
We had a
I was
motion.
lost in the motion.
Motion approved with the conditions 1, 2, and 4 as recommended by staff, and 3 as modified. And we have a second.
I did second it. Did we want to?
Any discussion?
I'm done. I've had enough. I'm sorry.
Any
Yeah.
discussion? All in
I
favor
think-
of your motion, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Okay. All right. We're not done yet. Hold on.
No, we've got to go back to.
Let's,
You got all that?
I gave read over it for you, please.
We're gonna have, how do I need to do that?
on the,
On the the motion before.
yes,
For Z 2130, correct?
yes.
So if we are going to revisit that motion and hear from staff and hear from the applicant as to the conditions, then the first thing you want to do is somebody will need to move to reconsider the motion approving the variance request in that case, Z 2130.
I would like to make a motion to reconsider, Z 21-30, reopening Z 21-30.
Reconsidering.
Reconsidering.
I'll second that.
And we have a second? All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. So our intention really was to include
The conditions.
the conditions
Yeah,
as,
we left them all.
as from staff, and I think, we discussed, 3 about the bonds and the funds. I think that cleared up my question.
So next,
So,
somebody will need to
need a
go ahead and make a
motion?
motion.
I make a motion, to approve with staff 4 conditions.
I will
As
second.
written. Okay. And we have a second.
Second, yes. But they,
Yeah, I think that'll work, yeah.
Yeah, that'll work.
Any discussion?
vote.
We need to vote before that, comes back up.
If you have
Well-
specific questions you would like to ask the applicant, the chair can ask them to come up and.
Yes, you do? Okay. You have a question for them?
I do.
Okay, would the applicant please come forward?
Yes.
Are you okay with these 4 conditions?
So we can definitely work with these conditions, just perhaps, obviously to get utilities, we need to be annexed. And if we could add some language that just simply
No.
says that we're, that we're released from these, obviously upon annexation, since that jurisdiction would logically move over to the city. So that would be, just to avoid any confusion in terms of jurisdiction, and I don't know, is there even a question on that, Josh, like once it gets annexed, is it just?
I don't know from a bonding standpoint how that would even, I don't even know this board has the authority to waive a bond requirement for a road that's being constructed in the county. It's in, because you have to put the bond up and then, you know,
So there's probably a mechanism.
There's something.
There's a mechanism built in so that.
I'm not familiar enough with it, and I don't know that the board has, it's happened before, but I'm not sure how it would work out, and I don't know that this is the place to kind of hash that out.
Yeah, to be clear, obviously, if we're building any county roads, we have to bond it. We're not asking for an exemption from that. I think it would be any bonding that would be associated with the, if there is bonding associated with the tree mitigation plan, obviously we want to be able to be released from that. The only other thing is what does substantial conformance mean? I mean, how do you interpret that? Because obviously, Peter said it well, we've got to get under construction and get the site mostly finished before we really make final decisions on where those trees go. So I'd hate for us to have our hands tied to say, wait, this was the plan. If it was just strictly based on numbers, we're totally good there. And also just the flexibility. Currently, it says 4-inch caliper trees, but there's a footnote that says we can also do a 2-inch caliper trees. The reality is 4-inch caliper tree has like a 2,000-pound trunk, and those do not perform. In 10 years, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a 2-inch tree and a 4-inch tree. So we'd rather plant double the number of trees to match that 1-to-1 replacement than we would sink a ton of money into 4-inch caliper trees that they're more mature trees that shock some. It's actually better for us to do smaller trees. So that would be the only thing is in terms of the substantial conformance that it's, we're doing a 1-to-1 replacement and we'll be able to, place those trees once we get further along in the final designs and the construction.
In attachment B, the mitigation plan, planting has not been finalized. So that's not been finalized. So in this case, if we have, it's going to have to be, if we keep the wording the same except without attachment B, replace it with the approved mitigation planning.
Right. So I think we have to do that. I read substantial conformances to be not making any huge changes. Is that now I'm not an attorney, so I can't sit here and tell you what those are.
Peak.
That would be staff's interpretation as well. I think, the point in that wording is, and Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is basically, if they're showing 4 trees underneath an existing tree canopy, they aren't gonna live, there's no point in planting 4 2-inch trees 10 feet away from an existing 40-inch oak tree.
Right.
And we've kind of discussed that administratively some, and I think that's the reason it's worded like that. So when they move further along in construction, we can look at it and kind of figure out the best place to put these trees.
And again, we're just gonna have to work that through in the construction documents. And there's already several layers in those construction documents that we're looking at in terms of the code requirement, landscaping requirements, and also the mitigation. Just make sure that everything coexists within a reasonable spatial limit, and everything has the right sizes. I mean, they are preserving some existing tree line out there as well, so we need to identify those areas, making sure that they're evenly distributing the trees, the mitigation trees throughout the site as well.
So if you all negotiate and approve one plan,
Right.
and if you do it in accordance with that plan, do we strike out the word substantial and just say in conformance with the approved mitigation plan?
Yeah.
I feel like that gives no variation there.
General conformance. That's even a little less than substantial.
What if we just put with plantings in the approved mitigation plan with no substantial changes? Would that suffice for staff?
Say that again.
I don't know if I can.
You're saying the same thing.
I mean, I think the applicant's concerned with substantial conformance, so if And our concern is it doesn't say the final mitigation plan, or the approved mitigation plan, because there is no approved mitigation plan yet. So I feel like we definitely need to say something about an approved mitigation plan.
Well, that's what you need to say. The loss of guarantee plan in an approved mitigation.
Yeah,
plan.
make it simple.
I mean, I'd like to clarify, there is an approved mitigation plan that we've agreed on. That's what attachment B is.
Okay.
And I
Didn't know
think
if it
the-
existed.
No, because Pete stood up here earlier and told us that was not
Final.
set in stone, that stuff could be moved.
Well, that's.
It's, I'll say this, it's approved in terms of the numbers,
Right.
but
Location.
the locations need to be worked out in the construction documents, and that's subject to the construction document approval at this point.
And that's the intent of this condition by staff.
So I believe the quantity is the key thing. We're totally on board with mitigating on a one-to-one basis. We just want to be able to collaborate with the staff on, hey, we should be doing 2-inch trees here, 3-inch trees here. As that language is written right now, we could all be sitting here looking at each other going, okay, what did that mean exactly? So if we could define that as just one-to-one per the agreed upon quantities, I think we'd be in good shape.
And staff does not care if they're 2-inch trees, 4-inch trees. I mean, it's actually, you know, Craig said earlier, it's actually better to put in smaller trees. They're gonna have a better chance for survival. So it's just up to them where they want to put them and how many they want to put in. They just need to meet the numbers.
So is there a number there now? Does staff have a number from the applicant?
Yeah.
Trees now?
Yeah, it's in the.
That's approved.
Yeah, that's
That's attachment B.
Approved plan.
Yeah.
All right, so if that's attachment B and that's the same, if staff doesn't care whether they're 2 inches or 4 inches. They just want the same quantity.
Yeah, and I just
That's
don't
what you're
know,
asking.
I just don't know if the mitigation plan, if we're referring to a drawing that actually shows tree placement. That's the reason, like, if the mitigation plan were a table that said we have 559 caliper inch trees that we have to replace, and here are the trees that we can use to replace them, hey, we're in good shape.
So is table make the same as plan?
Yeah, I don't know if there could be something to put in the condition of approval that they're subject to approval construction plans, and I mean, because that we're going to have to reference that mitigation plan with construction plans to make sure everything coexists. So that's what I would probably recommend, that they're just subject to approval of construction plans, and will be finalized during that stage.
But the quantity of trees will not change.
No, the quantity change.
Well, I think
let
it's
me-
the quantity of trees may change. We may end up with double the number of trees, and we're actually
Yeah.
good with that. It's just the caliper inches. So that's the inches will not change.
Correct.
So, is staff good with that?
Yeah, as long as the caliper inches are there, that's what,
Good, there we
that's,
go.
that's, and it's there, it's shown in the plans, we're good.
Is that the 596 inches?
I don't have the plans in front of me, but it's
Grand
probably.
Tree Mitigation Plan, drawing C-7.2. Is there a page number? No page number. I guess that's Appendix B, but
So this item would be addition.
this drawing,
Yeah, no, this is a different one. Which one is this?
Yeah, that's the plan right there.
I have 339,
what?
right here.
339
339. I think, are you looking at the other case?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's 339 for the school. The other one was for the roadway.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right, school. Right, and we're talking, you're right, we aren't talking about the school, we're talking about the roadway, because we're going back to the first
Yeah, we went
one.
back to this one.
596.
596, you're right.
So we are talking about the higher number.
So, do we still want to edit
0.3.
or do we just need to add that the quantity of inches in an approved mitigation plan shall not change?
Just take that again.
The quantity of inches, caliper inches.
The total caliper
caliper.
replaced. Yeah.
mitigation plan shall not differ, change, however you want to.
I think that's understood in what's been agreed upon
Yeah.
between the applicant and staff.
Well, apparently not, because the applicant standing up here asking us to clarify, so.
Well, it is an attachment B,
Yeah.
right?
And that would just come with the approval, so. Everything stated in the mitigation plan would be subject to the approval. So the numbers are in there. If it's approved, then those numbers will be approved along with it. So. And we're okay with that.
How long do these videos stay recorded online? Because I figure in 2 years, if there's a debate, we can just come back and watch the video and say, no, wait a minute, we all agreed to this.
So I still think the 596 should be in there.
I agree. Okay. Let's add that, make that, so I make a motion to approve along with staff's 4 conditions, and I would like to add a 5th condition, that the total number of inches in an approved mitigation plan shall not differ,
Or shall not be less than
shall not be less than 596
96.
inches.
Caliper inches.
Total caliper replaced, yeah. Yeah,
You got all that, Adrian?
but that's not a number 5, that would still be part of 3 then, I mean, that's the one we're looking at, right?
You can make it whatever, you know.
Make it easy, Al, just add a
Just
fifth.
add a 5th one.
Okay,
Not change anything. Okay.
So no less than, what was the final number?
596
6
inches.
inches.
Total caliper inches.
did you get that?
Oh,
We got a second?
oh, second.
All right, we have a motion to approve with the 4 conditions and the 5th condition concerning the total caliper replaced not being less than 596 inches.
Ought to cover it.
It's not, yeah. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Thank you.
I make
So,
oh,
no, go
so we
ahead.
good? Yes,
Think
we
we're
just
good.
did amended that, so we're done with that, right? We amended everything and changed it, so make a
Did
motion.
we get the third one come by? The first one? Did we sign the first one? This is the first
No,
one.
that's the first one.
Yeah.
So, make a motion to,
All right, all right, yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second that.
Second, all in favor, raise your right hand.
I raised my hand.